And our last talk for today is by Scott Hale on No Master Algorithm, Human-Machine Intelligence and the Real-World Needs of Fact-Checking and Content Moderation.
Good afternoon. You've made it to the end of the day. It's fantastic to be here. And I'm going to take you on a little journey, which is partially my own journey, which was as an academic working in Oxford for the last 10 years. But in the last 2 months, having now spent half my time working with Meedan as the new director of research there. And during that time, and indeed somewhat preceding that, it's become apparent that there are a number of differences in the way that academics often talk about mis and disinformation and the way that practitioners, people down in the field doing news verification and fact-checking talk about this. And when I was reading the literature, I thought these were 2 nice paper titles because they shared the first 4 words in common, toward automated fact-checking, : And then after the colon, though, you get very different stances, right? Detecting check-worthy factual claims, or developing an annotation scheme for claim detection. The first one is presuming that the system is going to determine what is check-worthy, whereas the second one is simply trying to detect claims writ large. And if you go on to read the paper, it's because the idea being that the fact-checkers will have additional things that can't go into that system. And so I think when I'm at academic conferences, I'm a computer scientist by training, although very active in many social science, with many social science colleagues now as well. But when I'm at my computer science conferences, I get a sense that there's this desire to build systems to decide which claims are the ones that need to be fact-checked. You know, if I can get a human to fact-check this thing, that's going to have the biggest impact and have the best public good. Or I could actually build the system, of course, to do the fact-checking or the moderation as well. But when I'm with colleagues at Meedan and out in the field and talking to people doing this work and with journalists, they say, well, you know, actually the things that I want to fact-check depend a lot on what I'm doing, right? It depends on the organization. Maybe I'm in an organizational context where we're particularly focused on the election. So anything that's non-election related is just out of scope right now. Or, you know, it's my own knowledge and expertise. We're starting a new vertical on health fact-checking as opposed to political fact-checking. And one of the key things that keeps coming up there is the sort of background knowledge that people feel they need to do fact-checking in that context. So yes, many journalists that I've worked with talk about wanting assistance to prioritize claims, you know, being able to detect those claims, monitor the media in real time, as we've heard about earlier in the day, you know, understand the reach of different claims and maybe sort them by domains or types of claims that are being made, etc. But they ultimately want to make the selection of the facts that they will go on to check themselves. And, you know, there are many things then that follow from that where they could be empowered, and we can build tools and use methods to make their job to do that fact check easier. One of the things, you know, here is simply managing pools of experts, identifying who are the relevant experts I need to contact. And if I'm in a group or an organization, can I make sure that we're sort of distributing those contacts so we're not sort of burdening the same experts over and over again. And so I want to make the pitch here, and in a way I'm talking to the converted already. I know, we're here, and you get it, probably. You know, we want to work together. We need practitioners, academics, platforms to work together. But I want to try to give you a few examples and ways we can do that, that hopefully will carry the conversation beyond today, beyond a 2-day event, that we can make this a more sustained endeavor. So I want to talk particularly around how we motivate the problems, and I'll come back to that actually towards the end. I'll talk about data collection, analysis, and the need for real-world data. And then method developments, not to solve fact-checking or content moderation per se, but many of the subtasks that maybe aren't as exciting to funding agencies and academia all the time, but would make a real difference and a real impact on the day-to-day processes that journalists and content moderators are working on. I'm going to talk about this in the context of check which is Meedan's sort of media annotation platform. It is essentially that we can put media items into the system, have a structured workflow through which a journalist, but also aided by bots and robotic actors, can go through and assess the veracity of content or enrich the content in other ways as well. And recently, we've been extending Check to integrate with messaging platforms so that our partners can create tip lines. And through those tip lines on WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, Twitter DM as well, they can receive in suggestions, claims from users on those platforms, go through a verification process, and then push the results back out to users. And I think this is creating a really valuable data set. So one of the main things that we have as a goal going forward is to try to come up with a process by which we can share our data in a way that is open for research and that can be used by everyone. Because ultimately, I say I'm the director of research at Meedan. I have been for about 2 months. I don't have a whole team of researchers. You out there are actually going to do much better things with the data than what we can do internally. Now, there's a number of challenges about this. We have to figure out how we can release this data in a way that respects the privacy of the users who are submitting the content, journalists who are doing annotations on this content, and indeed the people about whom the content also refers to as well. But we're working with partners at the Harvard Cyber Law Clinic and particularly Sean McDonald at Digital Public to investigate the idea of a data trust, essentially borrowing from English law the idea of trust, that data would be held in a separate entity for a specific purpose, and the trustee would have a legal obligation to that data, to use it for those specific purposes. And we're working through, as I say, there's sort of a million threats to work in how the data could be misused in these situations. But I think we owe it to ourselves to try to think about how we all could be better at sharing data and being able to get real-world data into academic examples and for academics to help bridge things into the real world. So there's a few things about methods development. David, he's down there. He's already stolen a lot of things. He's talked about the claim extraction, clustering, but I think this is a big point. When we started a tip line, our first tip line was in India, leading up to the elections running over April and May, and we had about 120,000 120,000 items of content submitted. And we were able to reduce duplicates. We got down to about 80,000 quote-unquote unique items. But actually, if you started to look at that data, it was very clear that there were still a number of duplicates there. Much of the data, though, isn't simply the text. It's not just extracting the text from these claims, but it's also dealing with images. And there are, of course, various algorithms to match images that perceive to be, are visually identical to one another. But then there are these really interesting edge cases that come up. What do you do with this? This is a low-quality match, quote-unquote, based on the perceptual hashing algorithm. And ultimately, though, these two are really a translation of one another, or they're basically making the same assessments, same sort of claims in different languages, a bit different editorializing the unique party, unique way of scam. Okay, that doesn't quite appear in the other one. But what I would suggest is that if a journalist is going through and annotating one of these pieces of media, then actually they'd be in a very good position to annotate the other one using much of the same sources. And so this is a valuable match in a way, but we have to work through the user interface to be able to present these and let journalists work through them in the way that they choose to. The other interesting thing about image matching here, and it just highlights the sort of challenge and differences that we face between academia and practice. I joined Meedan right around the time that this was deployed, and we were having these challenges where there were a number of similar images, and our partners, Proto in India, independent journalist group, were saying, look, there's a lot of duplicates that aren't being detected. And I thought, okay, I'm an academic, right? We need a test data set. We'll get our test data set. We'll look at the different approaches we could do. We'll have an evaluation point. We'll go through that. Maybe we'll do qualitative coding and sort of devise the whole research strategy. And by the time I had sort of devised a sort of way to test this, our development team had already gone off to a partner, VFrame, and integrated an image matching solution. It may not be the best solution, but they were already doing it because it was a real problem that our partners needed a solution to now, and it wasn't sort of amenable to the academic timing of how these things would work. So yes, we're still now evaluating and following up with other approaches. Indeed, there's been new developments like the PDQ algorithm that I've listed here. It's only recently come out from Facebook Research as a new method to approach image similarity. So we will follow these things up, but there's this difference in timing that's needed as well. We can find other similar images, but whether this is a good or a bad match perhaps depends a little bit on what the claim is. If it's, the breaking news part, then matching this would be good. But actually, if the text on top is different, then maybe we don't want to match these two. And similar here where we see images with and without text overlay. So what do we do in some of these corner cases, and how do we create the user interface experiences to help people, to help our users, to help journalists work through and group content in a way that can be helpful to their annotation and their efforts without overwhelming them. Beyond data, I want to talk about dialogue. I think it's really important that we have the venues like we do today, but in an ongoing fashion to be able to talk across groups. And so there's two initiatives that I want to talk particularly about today. Credibility Coalition, or CredCo, which is a joint initiative between Hackers and Meedan. And, it is essentially a volunteer group that is bringing people together simply to discuss and work on the different areas of mis and disinformation across academia, industry, practitioners, NGO, platforms as well. And we have working groups on things from information security, images and memes, UX, health, literacy, a number of things. They're all sort of bottom-up, piloting different ideas, bringing people across for dialogue in these areas. And I think this is hopefully one way that we can keep people connected together. Content moderation is a newer area for Meedan, but we're similarly trying to create a group there, which we're calling the Content Moderation Group, which is, again, dialogue working between academics and industry, platforms primarily, here to discuss the common challenges in content moderation, the different, how do we even define, what are the definitions of different types of actions we can take, and how do we discuss these things and have a public vocabulary so that we can communicate clearly to the public what the violations or what the reasons for takedowns or semi-takedowns, screening content, whatever these things are. On the content moderation database side, we're in the early stage of rolling out a searchable interactive literature database. Rather than creating just a literature review as we tend to in academia, we thought, well, actually what we'd like to do is get this online and make it in a way that it's accessible to policymakers, have summaries of the papers and the key findings, and then let people search and add to this database over time as it grows. That's very early stage, and it'll be a bit before it comes out, but I hope that will be a useful tool for practitioners to sort of get a handle on some of the academic literature in this space. On the other side, and much closer to hitting go live, in fact, there's a demo that was running today down in the common room, and I'm not sure if that table will be around tomorrow or not, but if we are, please come and check it out. But it's what the Credibility Coalition is rolling out, which right now we're calling Cred Finder. We may shift that name. But essentially, it's a mapping of all the organizations involved in information quality and credibility. And you can sort and search those organizations by the locations they're active in, by the languages, the types of things they're doing. You can see sort of in the tile view if they're doing sort of theory, practice, content, if they're building the infrastructure and the tools. And search and sort these things. If you click on one of these, and I didn't include the screenshot, but you'll see more detail, some information on their funding sources as well. And I really hope that this is a good tool for academics as well to reach out and locate partners in the various areas that could be of interest to your research and establish those connections. The final thing within Meedan is that we're also trying to do, yes, some of our own research and establish external research partnerships as well. So some of the image matching that I mentioned before, working on claims particularly as well. User experience things, how do we present the information? How do we communicate uncertainty, for instance, around the machine learning matches that we have, both to perhaps end users who are receiving verification reports and also to journalists who are working on that content and looking at the output of bots. I mentioned health earlier as I think a really interesting vertical. There's a real opportunity, I think, to move into some of the areas where unlike politics, there is more of a consensus as to what the scientific community believes around us, and we can move more strongly in terms of interventions that can be done in that space, perhaps. And finally, thinking about some of the local knowledge that's really important. We had a team out in Kenya working with content moderators just last month there, and they were devising the annotation schemes that they would use to assess content around the census that was happening in Kenya at the time, which is a highly politically charged event. And the types of things that they were annotating for were very different from the sort of perceptions we had going in to this. And I think it just points again towards the need to really engage local communities, understand the local context and knowledge here. So overall, I just want to make this pitch that as we work in these spaces of content moderation and news verification, fact-checking, there are lots of edge cases. Meaning is this really complex process, right? It's this negotiation between reader, algorithm, platform, author. And, it's not a steady state. It's always changing as well as new information emerges and facts and shift as well. So I really hope that we can find ways to connect together, to bring the insights from those who are at the forefront doing this work of content moderation, together with real-world data sets, the insights from research, and the infrastructure, the standards of the web, et cetera, to collaborate and work together, to innovate at all these different levels to really scale and address this problem. For me, I think that collaboration is not a nice to have in this space, it's really a must have. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. We have time for a couple of questions.
Everyone wants to go to the reception. We got one hand back there.
Yeah, thank you very much for the talk. Krishna from TU Darmstadt. I have a question. So you said you would like to see more collaboration between practitioners and researchers. How do you incentivize researchers when they go to their supervisor and say, hey, let me work on this applied project? They say, and the supervisor says, well, this is applied, don't do it.
I'm sorry, the supervisor says what?
It's applied research, don't do it.
Yeah, it is a challenge. I think what we need to do is do a better job of communicating what some of the real challenges are and what the problem space is, because I think there actually are original research challenges. We've already heard earlier in the day about some of the lack of NLP tools in certain languages, or You know, I think the sort of image clustering approach as well. Yeah, there are established algorithms, but I think there are also ways that we can innovate, and there might be particular approaches, particularly as we move from simply static images to videos as well, and trying to match videos across. There actually are a number of topics that I think do require original research. Those won't be the immediate things, but they can be very much motivated and informed by fact-checking. And yes, I guess to the second point, some things will be very applied, but I think we can see that as translating research, and we can work that in the academic incentive structures in a way. I mean, I know research councils here in the UK, for instance, are very much wanting projects to demonstrate impact. And I'm not sure that that's the best way or the only way to incentivize research, but I think we need to think about how we build these things into the academic research incentives as well.
One more question. Okay. There was someone stretching. Okay, then in this case,
thank you very much.
And just there's a short closing session and then the evening reception. So over to Arpit.
Okay, so I just want to thank everybody for coming and attending today's session. I hope you guys must have had a good time. And if you like the session today, then you are in for a treat for tomorrow, because we have got, again, a compelling list of speakers and some very good presentations. So I hope to see you all. I would also like to say that we have got a survey that we would like you guys to fill in. It's going to help us to understand what you liked, what you didn't like, so that we can take that feedback into account. If you are coming tomorrow, then you can fill the survey tomorrow, because it has got input for both the days. The other thing that I would like to mention is that this was the first version of TTO, but this is just the start of the journey for us. So we are planning to organize this conference annually, and we need your help to shape the future of TTO. So if you guys are interested in helping us with the organization or any other feedback that you have which could be useful to make it better for the community, then please come and talk to us. We'll be very happy to hear your thoughts in the reception. And another thing that I would like to mention is that I think we mentioned in the morning as well, which is we have got a special drinks reception for students who have registered for the conference, and it's tomorrow. And I hope you have already got an email, and if you haven't got an email, then talk to one of us and we'll tell you where is it. So yeah, I hope to see you tomorrow. And now we have got a reception, so I hope to see you all there. Thank you very much for coming.